Vancouver UFO meetup on November the 5th, 2020. Our guest is L.A. Marzulli. He was here in 2017. We met at a local chapel here in Vancouver with about 70 people. So L.A. Marzulli is an author, lecturer, and filmmaker. He's got a Christian worldview, and L.A.'s website is lamarzulli.net. He's penned 12 books, including the Nephilim trilogy, which made the CBA bestsellers list. And Ellie's going to talk to us about UFO disclosures. So welcome to the group, Ellie. Good to have you here.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for doing this. Normally, I don't, come into a small group like this because it's a lot of work. But since Vancouver has a special place in my heart because of Gordy and Al Matthews, for starters, and others, I spoke at the meetup group there, and it was just great to spend. I think we spent, what, Gordy, like almost a week, something like that. Anyway, a week up there, and a lot of those interviews made it into the film In Their Own Words, which I'm actually in the process of re-editing, because I think some of the information, that was my first independent film, and I know so much more about editing now than I did then. So I'm probably gonna, redo that. And then we've got another film coming out on UFOs. I've got George Norrie, Nick Pope, to name a few, Preston Dennett, who's been involved in the UFO research for literally decades. Trying to get Jacques Vallée, but he's not been responsive at all. Nick Redfern came on, and Bill Salas with his personal testimony, as well as others' personal testimonies. So, to get on track here, the bottom line is this: I've been banging this drum, like many of you, for decades, okay? And we have always been, those of us who talked about UFOs, who believe in them, any of you or us have had a sighting, that changes everything. Once you see one, unless you go the complete denial, where I didn't really see that, nope, my eyes playing tricks, I had too much coffee or whatever, right? Once you see one, it's over. And I saw my first one at 12, and I was walking up a path with 3 other boys. I was 12 years old, and I was at Camp Horseshoe, Rising Sun, Maryland. I could take you to the very spot. I'm sure it's still there today. The path I know is still there. I went on the Camp Horseshoe map and looked for it, and sure enough, it's there. And I'm walking up this path. It was either spring or fall, beautiful day, big blue sky, and we're hopping boulders. We're going up this dry creek bed because it's a shortcut back to our campsite for lunch. We're 12-year-olds. We're hungry, right? What can I tell you? So there's 4 of us, and I'm the last boy in line. And one of the guys stops and he goes, "Oh my gosh, what's that?" And the other 2 guys go, "Wow, what is that?" And I go, "What?" And they point there, and I look up, and it's like the classic silver disc, the classic 1950s silver disc, except it was circa 1962. 63, right around that window of time. Classic silver disc, close encounters of the first kind, about the size, a little bit bigger than the size of my thumbnail, if I hold it out like that, which is what we're always trying to do, about that far away. And the sun was glinting off of it. And I watched it for about 15, 20 seconds. And this thing just went like this, gone. I mean, just straight up in the air. In a blink of an eye, it was gone. And we ran back to camp as fast as we possibly could, yelling at the top of our lungs, "We saw a flying saucer, we saw a UFO." I mean, really, we were really agitated, very, very excited. And everybody, all the other boys crowded around us, as well as the scoutmasters, and we told the story. Well, that was lunchtime. By the evening meal, the other 3 boys denied that we had ever seen anything. And I refused to back down. I know what I saw, which actually is a name of another film, but I know what I saw. And I would not back down. I would not recant my story in any way. And that was sort of the basis of being at least open to the fact, because having seen one, I knew that they were real. Fast forward years later, when I'm about 30, and I become very, very interested in the Judeo-Christian worldview, so much so that it changed my entire paradigm. and I began to delve into supernatural, basically just the supernatural from a biblical lens. And I was astounded at what I was finding there. I was absolutely astounded at what was between those pages. And I had read it, you know, in my teens, and basically, well, I have no idea what this means. And it's a deeply encoded book, deeply encoded. But it's the type of thing that if you've got the key to open it up, it's like it's not ending. It's just mind-boggling what the information that's in there. But unless you've got the key to open its pages, it's a closed book. I don't care how many times you read it, it's a closed book. You'll never be able to understand what you're reading until you have the key. But once you get the key, which is free, by the way, then the book begins to unfold. And that in itself is incredible, but I digress. So the bottom line is, everyone sitting in this room knows about the tinfoil hat people, of which we're all of us here are definitely in that group, right? Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. UFOs, which were once the stuff of tabloid, as I say in my website, have now become mainstream. And it has literally become mainstream. Tucker Carlson in 2017, which was the basis, shameless plug, but for this book, UFO Disclosure of a 70-Year-Old Cover-Up, it was the basis for this book. I mean, I about fell off my chair, and I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. 2017, December, Commander David Fravor on Tucker Carlson. And Carlson goes, you know, this whole introduction, UFOs have always been thought of the stuff of tinfoil hat people, conspiracy theorists, and all the labels that have been put on us for decades. And then he kind of goes, maybe not so much anymore. And I'm watching this, you know, just on the edge of my seat. And there's Commander David Fravor, so it's Tucker here, Fravor in the middle, and over here is classified film. I mean, what at one time was highly classified film of a tic-tac shaped UFO hovering over the ocean. And Fravor's on the record, and he's talking about it, and he's there, and finally it comes down to the payoff. And Tucker Carlson asked him, in your opinion, what was this thing? And Fravor pauses just for a brief second, stares right at the camera, and said, whatever this was not of this world. I fell out of my chair, literally. I mean, I just was running around the house going, oh my God, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I was blown away. I figured my phone would be ringing off the hook because, I mean, I'm known for this. I've been on countless shows, going on coast to coast next week, as a matter of fact, talking not about UFOs per se, but it's all related about our work on the enigmatic elongated Paracas skulls and why I don't think that they're human. And I will emphatically state that on the show, that in my opinion, these are not human beings. These are genetic aberrations on some level. How they got there, we don't know. We only can surmise and you know, have conjecture as to why we think they are what they are, but they're genetic anomalies. But there's too many of them to be genetic anomalies. I think, once again, I'm down a rabbit hole, but I think that these are, in fact, the remnants of the Nephilim. So getting back to Commander Fravor, that was the first rung on the disclosure ladder. That was it. And before we move on to the second rung of the disclosure ladder, what we need to understand is, who the heck calls up Tucker Carlson's producers and goes, hey, we got this unknown guy, no one's ever heard of him. He doesn't have a book, he doesn't have a DVD, he's never been on TV before, but guess what? He's gonna be on your show next Friday. How does that sound? Who's got the power to do that? Who's got the power to do that? Who's got the power to get the classified footage on Tucker Carlson's show? Who picks up the phone and basically says, this is what you're gonna do next Friday night? And there's a reason why they chose Tucker Carlson and not another anchor, because Tucker Carlson's audience is conservative Judeo-Christian. That's basically what they are. They're very conservative people. So they figure, well, we'll run this up the flagpole there and we'll see what kind of reaction that we get. No reaction. Basically flatline. Nobody cared. My phone did not blow up. I think I had one or two emails. I had one phone call. Oh, did you see Tucker? Yes, I saw Tucker Carlson. You're the first and only person to call. Isn't that interesting? It was basically one big collective snooze fest. I mean, and Tucker Carlson at the end of Fravor's interview, looks right at the camera and said, this is far more interesting than the Russian collusion hoax. That's what he says, right? And it's like, here's the greatest story that's breaking on Fox News, and nobody cares. It's just like, oh my God. Dr. Roger Lear, the late Dr. Roger Lear, used to say this in his this is Dr. Roger Lear, that gravelly voice that he had. Hi, LA, how you doing? That thing. And Roger used to say, if a UFO landed on the 405 freeway and traffic was back up, everybody going, get that damn thing out of here. I'm late for dinner. That's exactly it. It's just unbelievable. It's just, you can't make this stuff up. And he was right. We really miss him. Really miss Raj. And we also miss, my late business partner, Richard Shaw. We did 10 films together in the Watchers series and had a great romp. And then we parted company very amicably. And I went off on my own. Richard taught me everything. In fact, episode 6 of the On the Trail of a Nephilim series is dedicated to him. There's a whole clip that I put at the end of all these different stills of the two of us on our adventures together. So I miss him. He was a good friend. We did a lot of good work together, I think. But getting back on track, that's the first rung of the disclosure ladder, was Commander David Fravor. Well, several weeks go by, and again, that's the nexus for this. I mean, when that story broke, we had a conference. I was in California then before the fire, so we drove down the Oceanside, and I spoke. And on the way back from Oceanside, we stopped at this really cool little, actually not little, huge Italian restaurant, but they had breakfast. And so we went in there, and we were like almost the only two people seated. And it was more of a dining room, very elegant dining room, just beautiful restaurant. And I Peggy, you got any paper? And I'm brainstorming in my head, and she pulls out a pad, and I basically wrote the, wrote the chapters. Tucker Carlson's UFO disclosure, new information from Roswell, New Mexico, the ongoing abduction phenomenon. Do the 1 billion abortions worldwide have something to do with what we are seeing? Are hybrids real? Revisited the implant phenomenon and what it means. UFO brain fog, on and on and on. That was basically the rough draft, or the outline of the book was done over a breakfast. I think I spent about, maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks writing it at the most. It just, when you live with it that long and you've got so much information, it's like, well, what do I want to leave out? What do I want to say here? Some of this we've already said. Is it good to go back and regurgitate? Yeah, it is. Because people haven't been, picking up that book. That might be the first book that they've ever picked up. So anyway, about a month and a half, 2 months go by after Commander David Fravor comes on, and then they've got Luis Elizondo on. Okay, and Luis is there, and Tucker asked him the $64,000 question. Does the United States have in its possession wreckage from a crashed UFO? And Elizondo hems and haws and makes this big deal about his non-disclosure agreement. It's just like laughable, Well, if you're really concerned about your non-disclosure agreement, you would just say, Tucker, I'm sorry, but I cannot confirm or deny that question. That's what you would say. No, he hems and he haws and he tap dances around, and he finally goes, well, Tucker, the short answer to that is yes. And Tucker asks the question again, and he once again makes this big deal about his non-disclosure agreement, and then says, yes. That's all I can say, Tucker, yes. Well, you've already spilled the beans. You're telling us that the United States government has in their possession hubcaps from UFOs. That's how Gary Stearman puts it, hubcaps from UFOs. It's hysterical, right? So the United States got some loose hubcaps that fell off the craft. Anyway, I thought it was humorous when Gary said that. So the first rung is Commander David Fravor. Whatever I saw was not of this world. Second rung, United States got metal from the United States. That's the second rung. This is all a managed agenda. I can't stress this enough. It's being rolled out and done very, very deliberately, methodically, and they wait. They see what the reaction is, and then they go to the next rung. So the second rung is Luis Elizondo. Well, the third rung is, once again, when Elizondo, in one of his cohorts, comes on. He was also on Glenn Beck. This is the third rung of a disclosure ladder, and he basically stated, yes, we tested the metal from the UFOs, and they have isotopes in them not found on this earth. Okay, so that should make everybody just freeze, dead in their tracks. That's the third rung. So now we have, just to recap, what I saw was not from this world. The United States government has UFO metal from crashed UFOs. We tested the metal. There are isotopes not found on this earth. And this, again, is all on Tucker Carlson. What's the reaction? Flatline. Nobody does doodly squat. Nobody, and I mean, I had some, by the third rung on the disclosure ladder, because I was banging on it at this point, constantly talking about it. So more and more people were jumping on the bandwagon, at least in my circle, people that follow us, and they realized that something was up. So every time something would happen from that point on, I would get a flurry of emails the next day or within an hour, or people watching Tucker Carlson would go, he's going to have, somebody else talking about UFOs, LA. So that's the third rung. The fourth rung is when the United States Pentagon declared that UAPs are in fact real. We don't know what they are. And notice they changed the verbiage from UFOs because that's a dirty, we can't have that, right? So we're just going to change the name to UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, and that's what they did. And once again, flatline. No one did doodly squat. People yawned, went about their business, and that was the end of it. That's the fourth rung on the disclosure ladder. Well, the fifth rung, which came up several months after that, and that's happened this year in 2020, is when, once again, the United States doubled down and basically said, we have in our possession off-world vehicles. So now we've gone from hubcaps to entire vehicles. And this, of course, and I did a whole PPS report. That's my daily show on YouTube, PPS report. It's just under LA Marzulli. But I did a whole show on that, a series of shows on that. Basically, by saying that we have off-world vehicles in our possession, that validates the work of Bob Lazar all day long. And I was always a fan of Lazar. I believed Lazar. I spoke to Lazar in the 90s when all this was coming down. And this was right around the time where he was getting involved with the whole brothel thing, which completely discredited him on so many levels. But I've watched the new film, and Lazar is Lazar. He never backs away. He never changes the story. And in my opinion, he was there. He saw it. And that's it. And now the United States government has validated it. So that's number 5. 5.2 was we were hoping, we heard that they were going to maybe show pictures or film, and they didn't do that. They've stopped short of, that's number 6. When they actually, or, we don't know what 6 is, but 5.2 was once again, Commander David Fravor is on the show, Tucker Carlson. And he releases something which he could have told us 3 years prior, but he didn't. But he released it then on Tucker. And he said, you know what? When I got close to the tic-tac shaped object, it jammed my radar. That's an act of war. That is an act of war. If they jam your radar, that's an act of war. Well, the UFO jammed Commander David Fravor's radar. So what we got here is a series of ongoing disclosure, very slowly, very methodically, very deliberate, very controlled, very orchestrated, very organized, very managed to the flippin' nines, to the nines. That's how much this thing is managed. So what's next? Well, I've been talking about this with my good friend, Gary Stearman, and we think that, and I've said this on my own show, that what's next at some point, and here's some scenarios, at some point they will roll out the film from Roswell, which will be incredibly embarrassing. Because, for like 60 years, all they've done, or 70 years, right? All they've done is like, no, Roswell, case closed, and all this other absolute hooey. It's just total nonsense. And, can you imagine if they have like some retired Pentagon Air Force guy or whatever, on Tucker Carlson, and they have a duplicate of the film, and they're showing maybe not the alien bodies. They won't go there, not for number 6, although they could. Number 6, if they show a film, they'll show the debris field with the saucer, and that would be huge. If they actually show something like that from Roswell, and they admit that it's been a 70 year cover up, then that would really be incredible, really be incredible. So that's what's going on. In the meantime, even today, I got a clip from photographs allegedly taken in Brazil, and I looked at them and I showed them on the show, and I just said, look, there's no way to tell from this. It's so easy to Photoshop. This one, to me, at the bottom, it was all different shots of the same craft, which was an orb, a circle that had 3 lights on the bottom of it. One of them looked pretty convincing because the orb was here and it was shining light in the sky below it, just a little bit. That could have, that kind of piqued my interest. One of them looked like they'd just been stuck there in Photoshop, in post-production. Hard to say. So I weighed in on it, and I just said, look, I don't know what we're looking at here. I would need to see the original photograph to even make any type of, a real educated weigh-in on what we were looking at. A friend of mine, a neighbor of mine, the day of the fire, she's out there snapping pictures. She lives above me, about as the crow flies, about 3/4 of a mile away, and she's elevated. So she's looking down the canyon to where the fire is, way, way, way in the distance. All she can see is like, the red haze. And she's clicking on her iPhone, but she didn't look at the photograph. She just went click and put her phone away. Well, a couple of weeks later, she's looking at it, and she goes, oh my gosh. And she sends the photo out to her friends, and she goes, what do you think this is? Classic UFO. Classic UFO. And we interviewed her for the film, and we showed the photograph on her phone. So it's not Photoshop. The photograph is there on her phone. She took us to the place on her property where she actually took it. So I vetted that. It's a classic UFO, classic UFO. It's basically within 100 yards over my house. Very low, very, very low to the ground. Probably a couple 100 feet maximum. And the day of the fire, it's like if I were in the back part of my property, I would have seen it very easily. It would have been less than a couple 100 yards away, as I said, if that. Very, very close. The day of the fire. So, what does that mean? I don't know, but we find that very interesting. We were in Dallas the day of the fire. The fire, of course, obliterated our lives, and here I am in Oklahoma. So those are some thoughts with the disclosure, the ongoing disclosure. When the United States government makes a claim like we have in our possession off-world vehicles, that immediately makes all of us wonder, well, who's making these off-world vehicles and what world are we talking about? And that's what's huge. In my personal belief, and I know a lot of you will disagree on this, I do not believe that they are from other planets. I believe that they are interdimensional. And I know Jacques Vallée at one time held that view. Whether he does or not today, I don't know. If I'm able to talk to him. More and more physicists and astronomers, whatever, are coming out thinking that we're in some sort of a holographic type universe where this whole thing is, is it real? Oh yeah, it's real. I get that. But we're in some kind of like matrix program in a way. There is a very interesting scripture from the guidebook of the supernatural, which is what I call the Bible, by the way, because it is a guidebook of the supernatural. You need the key to open it, but once you open it, if you got the key and you can open it, then it just expands. It's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And one of the things that you find in there is that the entire universe will be remade, rolled up like a scroll. That's what it says. I will roll up the universe like a scroll and create a new heaven and new earth. Well, that's preposterous. We all know that. That's the craziest. That's beyond science fiction. That is like absolutely crazy. And yet, that's what's written there. Most people don't know that. Is it literal? In my opinion, it's totally literal. That's what is going to happen. Whoever these entities are, manipulate space, time, matter, and energy in ways that confound us. They defy our laws of physics. And I remember I was on with
What's the
Richard
gentleman?
Richard Hoagland,
Nick-
Oh,
Richard
Richard
Hoagland.
Hoagland.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was on
Look for
Hoagland.
me.
Yeah, I was on Hoagland's show. We were going around and around about this, and he said, "Well, just because they can defy our, our laws of physics, that doesn't mean that they're, superior or that's somehow that's supernatural." And my answer to him was, "Well, yeah, I get that. That's easy for you to say. They're defying the laws of physics. To us, it seems like magic. To them, it's not magic because they can do it. It's not like hocus pocus, but they can do it. They can manipulate space, time, matter, and energy that we can't do that. So they are on some level superior." I was at a conference and I was, the only guy in the room who had a different opinion. George Norrie was host. Nick Pope was there. Michael, he's on Ancient Aliens all the time. Nick Redfern was there. Other people were there, and it was poorly attended. There's maybe 200 people. When I came out on Saturday night and I gave my lecture, which was about an hour and a half, 2 hours long, the cooks and the kitchen people came out and listened. The bar was an open bar on the right-hand side, funky little conference, right? But there was a bar, a bunch of people were talking. When I'm about 20 minutes in, you can hear a pin drop into the room. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I say that because the information I was giving, these people had never heard any of that before. And that's the thing, it's like freedom of speech. You might not like the paradigm that I hold to and study and adhere to and promulgate, but nevertheless, what if that paradigm's true? We don't know whether it is or not. Of course, I believe it is. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on this show doing this. So I believe that we are in a holographic universe. I believe these entities are incredibly nefarious. They have very bad intentions for us. And the proof of the pudding was I asked the audience, all 200 of them, how many think it's good to abduct a 5-year-old boy and implant him? Show of hands, please. Not one hand went up, not one. And I said, here you guys are. You're sitting here at a UFO conference, and I just busted you. Not one of you think it's a good thing to abduct a 5-year-old boy against his parents' wishes and implant him. None of you think that's a good thing. Why is that? Why is that? See, if everything is relative and there are no absolutes, then, that's a good thing. I get that. But instinctively, viscerally, why is it that everybody in the room agreed, no, we shouldn't be doing this? Why we had unanimity. And that in itself, if I don't know whether the people in the room really stopped to ponder what just happened, but what just happened showed that there's something intrinsic in every single person, regardless of their view, that led them to come up with exactly the same answer without any equivocation. It's a bad thing. They shouldn't be doing that. How does that work? If it's moral relativism, how does that work? You get where I'm going? I mean, it's like, okay, I guess it's not good to abduct a 5-year-old against their parents' wishes and abduct them. That's a no-no. So we all agreed on that in the room. Whoever is doing this has spent an awful lot of time on the implants. The implant we removed, which was number 17, which was sort of stolen from us. I won't get into that, but it was stolen from us and got on Netflix. But you actually hear my voice in the film, but you never see me. And it's just unbelievable. That's how the game is played, folks. But steal your stuff. So we were there and we couldn't find the implant. And we had done a rigorous protocol with x-rays and CAT scans and ultrasound machines. I mean, the whole gamut of Dr. Roger Lear's protocol, which he set in place before we were in the operating room. We knew exactly where the implant was. We knew it was metallic. Dr. Matriciano, the surgeon, had found the implant within 2 minutes in the pre-op. But now we're there in the operating room. We can't find the thing. And it's been an hour and 20 minutes. We cannot, it's like it's cloaked. It's like it's vanished. And so, and I'll say this, Gordy will know what I'm talking about. Maybe some of others will, but my spirit guide, I say that with quotation marks. my spirit guide tapped me on the shoulder and basically said, you need to take authority over this. So I did. And I'm in a room full of people that I don't know except for Richard. And I say, this is going to sound really weird, but I'm going to pray and I'm going to do it now. And basically what I said was, Father, if there are forces which are cloaking this device, I ask that you would break their power and do it soon. That's all I said. That's all I said. Within a minute or two at the most, the object came in from the back of the screen like this, like that. And everybody just went, oh my gosh, what's that? That's the implant. And then we show in the film, step by step by step, its removal. So these are real. And someone had switched it off, number one, but someone also had cloaked it, number two. They knew what we were up to, and this is what's chilling. They knew what we were up to, and they were trying to prevent it. That object was cloaked for an hour and 20 minutes. And when we finally found it, Dr. Matriciana is going like this with the ultrasound wand and looking at it. It's like putting it back on the patient, picking it up again, tapping it, looking at it, trying to see if there's something wrong. Nothing wrong with the wand. Something else was at play here. And I remember going up to Roger the following Monday. This was on a Saturday in the operation theater. And I said to Roger, I hope you realize what happened in that operating room. And he looked at me, his eyes got really big, and he said, LA, I now believe that there's a supernatural dynamic to the UFO phenomena. And I'm going to tell Whitley Strieber about that. Several months later, Roger was dead, massive heart attack. Whether or not he told Whitley, I don't know. Whitley was at the funeral. We never got to speak to him. So I don't know. But those are some thoughts regarding disclosure, regarding the implant stuff. I think COVID-19, we've never had anything like this in the history of the world, where the entire planet goes into this, blinders on. Everybody left turn now. And everybody just goes dink like this. It was unbelievable, an unprecedented moment in human history. And I'm not going to get into it with what I think about COVID. That doesn't really matter. I'll just say this. I think it's one of the biggest scams. Is it real? Yeah, it's real. I get it, but it's a scam. It's a scamdemic, but I digress. But that's a warm up to where it's going to go when they show up. You think this thing changed the planet? And I'm talking about a mile-wide craft. The mile-wide craft shows up anywhere. And, people, oh, well, a mile-wide, that's impossible. Blah, 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 blah. I've talked to pilots who have seen mile-wide craft. Don't tell me they're not out there. I've been doing this forever. I know they're real, burgeoning, and not going away. And at some point, there will be full disclosure. And when that happens, this planet as we know it will be like COVID. The whole planet will just go ching. It's a paradigm shift, a global paradigm shift, unlike anything. You think COVID was weird? Wait till this thing happens. Unlike anything any of us have ever experienced. It will shake the very fabric of societies everywhere. It will shake all religions down to their core. Many of them will just completely dissolve. It will cause a massive falling away from the so-called church. It will. People will just abandon their belief system, and they will believe what these entities tell them. That's what they will believe it. They will believe this is the truth. They'll also, these entities that will come, they'll have two things. One thing will be some sort of an implant, which when you take it, will prolong your lifespan. 300-500 years disease-free. The second thing that they'll give us will be some sort of a free energy that pilots the craft. So we're looking at a mega lever, something that changes the entire planet, which has never happened before. You look at things like history is like a flat line, okay, till you get to the Gutenberg printing press, right? And then it's like, ding, everything changes. Gutenberg figures out a way to print this stuff. Now the common man can read, which until that happened, you had a bunch of scribes sitting in a stinking scriptorium. Only the elite and the very wealthy had books. And if you had like 20 books in a library, you were considered that was just extravagant. All my books burned in the fire. Probably, I don't know, between 1,500 and 2,000 books. And I can never really duplicate that library again. And I'm certainly not going to start trying now. I turned 70 this year. So there's no way I'm going to, go out. People have been sending me a lot of stuff. I did go to a used bookstore and I did buy some of my old friends just to have on the shelf. And now I probably have a couple of hundred sitting here. But here's the deal. Until Gutenberg, it's flatlined, okay? And the printing press comes up and it changes everything. Well, you could go from Gutenberg up to the present day. Certainly Nagasaki and Hiroshima were two events which changed the entire global consciousness because they realized we had weapons of mass destruction and you could obliterate hundreds of thousands of people at the touch of a button, unprecedented. Or is it? Look at, I can never pronounce the name of the place in India that appears to have a nuclear weapon thousands of years ago. I just can never remember it. I'm sorry. It's like right there. It just won't. Anyway, that's what happens when you get 70, I guess. But they were turned everything like glass, and something happened there, and it shows that it's that it looked like some sort of a nuclear event happened. So when they show up, and they will show up at some point, that's the mega lever. That will change life as we know it on this planet completely, and in ways that we're not ready for. It may usher in some very draconian measures that most fair-minded people will not just go goose-stepping into this, new age deal. So, in my opinion, there's a very nefarious game going on here, or the nefarious agenda. Really, game is the wrong word. A very nefarious agenda. It's been written about extensively in the Guidebook of the Supernatural, which talks about this stuff. The Bible speaks of it with great precision, and through the prophetic words written thousands of years ago, the stage is set, absolutely set for this to happen. Just think of this one thing, which is really interesting, that there's a 2,000-year-old scripture which says that you will not be able to buy, sell, or trade in those days unless you have this mark, okay? That's written almost 2,000 years ago. So how is it possible, if you go back 200 years ago, just 200 years ago, and I would read that out of the Guidebook of the Supernatural, you'd sit there and you'd go, well, that'll never happen. I mean, that's just preposterous. How can you put a mark on someone so that they can either buy, sell, or trade, or not buy, sell, or trade? I mean, that's not going to happen. I mean, that's impossible, right? So here we are, and we all know that we're living in a window of time where I can take this little goofy piece of plastic with a chip in it, and I can go to any ATM machine on the planet. I can stick that in, and out will come currency, so I can spend it, right? And it's just unbelievable. So the technology, because the chip is in the card now, pretty soon it will be in the back of the hand or in the forehead, just like the Guidebook of the Supernatural tells us. So that's written 2,000 years ago. There's other scriptures that say men will faint from fear from what is coming upon the earth, that even the elect would be deceived if that were possible, that the dragon will come with all signs and lying wonders. That's just a few of them, written thousands of years before us. And, why it might seem vague, something is coming. Something is coming. We all know that. Something is coming. And the question is, what are we looking at? And what's manifesting in the skies with this endless cat and mouse game that we see? Endless cat and mouse game. I mean, even with Brentwater, right? It's still this cat and mouse game. It's just, we've got, off-world vehicles in our possession. Well, there's the quid pro quo that Bob Lazar was talking about, where we gave them access to our population, allegedly, and they gave us some of the scout ships, like Bob Lazar likes to talk about them, which came from either, Eisenhower, Truman, whatever. I mean, that's where it came from. So it's unbelievable to think about that we're in a window of time where full disclosure could happen. And it could happen any day. I mean, that's the thing. Tucker Carlson's rolling it out. And Tucker, remember, his producer, he's reading off a teleprompter. His guest may or not, it might be remote feed, it might be in the studio. It doesn't matter. You know, Tucker's producers, he shows up to work. They're brainstorming always. What about this guest? What about this guest? He's talking about current political things, you know, events, he has to. But then out of the blue comes Commander David Fravor, followed by Luis Elizondo, followed by Elizondo again. And in between that, he had Leslie Keene on, he had Nick Pope on, and others talking about the veracity, the efficacy of the UFO phenomenon. So it's being managed, it's being rolled out. And it could, the whole thing could break open. And when it does, I'm telling you, life as we know it changed dramatically under COVID. If they show up, life as we know it will come to a grinding halt. And this whole thing will be rethought. It will, life as we know it, when they show up, the life that you know and I know now will never be the same. We're not going to go back to that. Just like Dr. Fiasco, my name for Dr. Fauci here, because this guy's been wrong on everything all throughout the pandemic, the scamdemic. So Dr. Fiasco, you know, was to put the kibosh on everything and ground our economy, which was a juggernaut, to basically to a standstill. Everything changed. And as Fauci said, you know, we might not go back to normal for the next till 2021. Now they just keep pushing the goalposts further and further back. So we see everybody wearing these goofy masks and social distance. Meanwhile, we don't know the efficacy of the masks. You can't get a straight answer. On some of the boxes, these masks that you're paying for will not prevent COVID-19. Spread of COVID, it says it right on the box, will not prevent COVID-19. So I say all that to just warn us that when this thing happens, it's not something out of a Spielberg movie where we all, you know, look serene and happy as the UFO carries Richard Dreyfuss to parts unknown. I mean, that's just, you know, with the celestial music in the background and the feel good stuff of like E.T. on his goofy bicycle and all this crap. It's not that at all, in my opinion. It's something far more nefarious. And what it will do, it will usher in a global government. And that global government will be, in my opinion, extremely draconian. And we're already seeing that. And maybe some of this is a dry rehearsal, you know, or dress rehearsal, I should say, for the real thing. To see what people will do. Well, in Europe, everybody just laid down, and mostly in America, same thing. Up in your neck of the woods, up in Canada, wear that mask. You know, no one's questioning it. In states like Michigan, with the goofy governor up there, I mean, this woman got to go. And many people in the United States just wear their mask, social distance, and they'll get angry if you even bring up the fact that, you know, why are we doing this? What's going on here? It's like, has there any scientific study on the efficacy of the face mask? Where we've got Fauci saying in February that the face mask won't do us any good, but now, you know, everybody has to wear face masks. So the goalposts change, the dialogue, the narrative changes, and with no end in sight. So I basically say all that to get back to full disclosure. I don't think it's a benevolent, wonderful thing. I think it's going to, although at first it might appear that way. At first, because they're going to try to lull us in on some level, but then it's going to get really weird. I think really weird. If I'm right, if these are interdimensional entities that have a nefarious agenda, and I believe it's incredibly nefarious, Dr. Jacob and I disagree on the fact that I'm interdimensional and he thinks that they're extraterrestrial, but we do agree that there's a nefarious agenda here with these guys. We agree on that. I know he's not in the game anymore, so to speak, but we agree that that's what we're looking at here. So, you know, folks, let's open it up for some questions. But I think
let's
we're
have
close.
some questions,
I think we're on the
comments.
cusp of it.
But great talk, LA. Very good. So yeah, if anybody has
thank you.
questions,
Thank you.
comments.
Thanks, Brian.
And thank you, Gordy, for setting this up.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome. I'm very happy to
Thanks,
help.
Gordy.
Gordy. Thank you, LA. You did an excellent job here of what you do.
Thanks, Steve.
And yeah, I've been listening to you since you ever started on any of the talk shows.